We started to care for one another much more at that point, and I believe that's when things in our relationship started to get extremely difficult. There were 72 of such shows. When it came to altering episodes of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, CBS had very severe guidelines. Every second was examined. Every phrase was examined. But something did make it through on September 17, 1967. The editors didn't notice. Nobody in authority noticed it. Not until much later did even the brothers know. The camera accidentally captured something in the backdrop as The Who was performing. It validated what everyone believed but was unable to verify. A horrible incident marked the start of the Smothers Brothers' tale. Major Thomas B., their father. He served as an army officer. In 1941, during World War II, he was in the Philippines. He and his wife Ruth, together with their 2 boys, were sent away when Japan invaded. Major Smothers was apprehended. He survived the dreadful Bataan Death March. He was then transferred to the rigorously regulated Japanese prison camp known as Fukuoka No. 22. In April 1945, when the war was coming to an end, he was too ill to work. On April 25, he was sent from Fukuoka to Korea. He never made it there. He was buried at sea, according to a number of news outlets. Some claim that he was executed by burning at the stake in Korea. Out of the 110 men that were moved with him, just 36 survived. Major Smothers was the last to pass away. Ruth was left in charge of raising Dick, 1938, and Tom, 1937. While they were growing up in California, their mother put in a lot of overtime. For many years to come, they ridiculed those who had difficult lives. That comedy truly took off at a small San Francisco club called the Purple Onion in 1959. People loved the brothers so much that they stayed for 36 weeks, even though they were only scheduled to be there for 2 weeks. The way they combined humorous storytelling with folk music was well received. One night, a flamenco dancer was injured. She had to be replaced by Tom and Dick. When they unexpectedly appeared, everyone could see how unique they were. By the end of their stint, they were earning $2,000 each week. Only a few months ago, they were earning $2 per night. It was published in 1961 under the title The Smothers Brothers at the Purple Onion. They received their first job as a result. They were in a band that Tom founded while he was a college student before they joined the Purple Onion. The Casual Quintet was the name of the group. Dick picked up the bass just to play with Tom. The others departed one by one, but Tom and Dick persisted. They started joking around in between songs to kill time. Their style truly began at that point. They discovered that their sibling taunting elicited just as much laughter as their music. That sibling taunting turn became their specialty. Dick was the serious brother on stage, and Tom was the innocent brother. A brawl broke out between them in front of everyone. When Tom said, "Mom always liked you best," there was truth to the statement, and the crowd would roar. That's just the way they were. Because their entertainment was based on actual occurrences, people could identify with it. By the mid-1960s, they had an opportunity to grow even further. On Sunday nights, there was a significant disparity between NBC's Bonanza and CBS. A quarter of all U.S. TV viewers were watching Bonanza. It had already defeated 2 other CBS hits, Perry Mason and The Gary Moore Show. CBS decided to try something different. They wanted the younger generation to attend. It was believed that the Smothers Brothers could accomplish it. Dick and Tom were intelligent, humorous, and different. They believed they could restore CBS's reputation. On February 5, 1967, the inaugural edition of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was broadcast. It initially appeared to be just another entertainment program. Ed Sullivan portrayed them as typical American children. However, it was evident after a few performances that they were anything but typical. The Vietnam War was the subject of the joke. They ridiculed leaders. They discussed crucial topics. They were bold and clever in their jokes. People like it when they broke the rules once a week. They surpassed Bonanza in viewers in just 2 weeks. The younger generation observed. The advertisers were overjoyed. Tom had requested complete creative control before they began. They needed a hit, so CBS obliged. After that agreement, they could say whatever they wished. Pete Seeger and other folk singers were asked to perform anti-war songs. They ridiculed President Johnson on television programs around the nation. Every show seemed like a pleasure. Every show seemed like a gamble. At every stage, the CBS editors opposed them. They retaliated, and the band was frequently featured in the performance. The writing crew exhibited the same bravery as the hosts. Among the young comic book writers who began their careers there are David Steinberg, Lorne Michaels, Rob Reiner, and Steve Martin. Important jokes were told by them. They did not adhere to TV regulations. Many of them permanently altered American humor. Their work influenced Saturday Night Live, All in the Family, and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. In 1968, something unexpected occurred on American television. The Beatles' Hey Jude clip was featured on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour on October 6 of that same month. It had been cited on September 8, a few weeks earlier, in the United Kingdom. However, this was the first time that this type of film was available to Americans. Back then, they were referred to as advertising photographs rather than music videos. The Beatles shot Hey Jude at Twickenham Studios on September 4. Paul McCartney even made the set. A large crowd of white tuxedo-wearing people joined in. Alongside the main cast, another 300 individuals sang the ending. Ringo Starr had recently rejoined the band after briefly departing it. It was not merely a song. For them, it was a huge deal. The following week, it appeared on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Back-to-back viewing of two Beatles films gave Americans a new perspective on the band. Not even the Ed Sullivan Show could pull this off. The Smothers Brothers had access to something that no one else did. It seemed like a significant shift. There was a change in the music. And the TV was changing. In 1967, the same show hosted another significant occurrence. Pete Seeger was asked to sing. For years, Seeger has been prohibited from television. The suspension had kept him off the radio for over 17 years. By the time he performed Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, he was obviously criticizing Johnson's Vietnam policy. CBS cut the song before it aired in September 1967. Tom Smothers was not going to remain silent. He saw to it that the word spread. People were furious, so CBS had to allow Seeger to return. On February 25, 1968, a large audience finally saw him perform the song unhindered. It was the first time a band artist had been so outspoken in their criticism of the president. At the time, protest music had the ability to dismantle walls. No other bands were allowed to perform on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. The Who, The Doors, Jefferson Airplane, Buffalo Springfield, and Steppenwolf were among the bands that performed between 1967 and 1969. These weren't the best choices for major television. The Who destroyed their equipment and detonated fireworks in Keith Moon's drum kit at the conclusion of one performance. Things flew into the air and Pete Townshend's ears ached from the noise. The Doors performed Touch Me with a full choir. Crown of Creation was one of Jefferson Airplane's other songs. It has to do with fear of nuclear war. Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild and Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth were heard by people all over the world, and the Smothers Brothers didn't care if it alarmed the network. They wanted to provide a forum for these dissident opinions. That spirit was loved by some of the biggest names in rock. On April 26, 1969, Jimi Hendrix honored the Smothers Brothers by pausing before a song during his performance at the Los Angeles Forum. They were heroes, he argued, for allowing art and dissent to coexist on television. Hendrix's life was at its peak during that period. Hendrix remembered that the show had been too contentious for CBS to continue. He emphasized the importance of the Smothers Brothers to everyone on stage. The combination of comedy and music had never been so harmonious, and they did it with a smile. Share a Little Tea with Goldie was a typical sketch that served as an excellent illustration. Goldie O'Keefe, portrayed by Lee French, was a hippie who was absorbed in his thoughts and offered wise counsel that had multiple meanings. The code word for pot was tea. Before the authorities forced them to change it, she went by the slang term Goldie Keefe, which means cannabis. However, most viewers at home were aware of what was actually happening. When Goldie said roaches, no one assumed she was referring to bugs. The joke appealed to younger viewers because they believed the show was mocking them. The network monitored the situation, but Goldie gained popularity. Nothing was ever hidden by Keith Moon. The Who was on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour on September 17, 1967. He decided to go farther than normal. When the band arrived to perform My Generation, Moon had a surprise in store. Bombs were concealed inside his kick drum. That much no one had agreed to. Even his bandmates were unaware of what was about to happen. Moon desired the ideal conclusion, loud, wild, and unforgettable. When the song's final verse came on, the bombs detonated with a tremendous explosion. Like smoke and smoke, objects flew over the stage. A chunk of cymbal struck Moon, knocking him backwards. His hair was blown up, leaving it all jumbled up. The impact of that blast would change Townsend's hearing forever. Everyone was startled into silence by the loud noise. They cheered and hollered after that. Moon had done exactly what she had planned, causing confusion and a show. But the cost was considerable. In one ear, he would lose about 90% of his hearing. Then there was an agonizing sound that persisted. Townsend continued to discuss the anguish and how the damage affected his ability to play the guitar even after many years had passed. Everyone found it to be a remarkable experience that altered their future work practices. Then came the guitar. In the midst of the turmoil and smoke, Townsend snatched Tom Smothers' acoustic guitar and shattered it on stage. Being too shocked to speak, she remained silent. A loud, irate moment that revealed the Who seemed like the appropriate method to put an end to the mayhem. Before, no one had the courage to touch those lines. It wasn't simply the explosion and the damaged instrument that made headlines. The rock event became well known. It was adored by younger fans than me. The elderly were furious. The show gave America something authentic, unvarnished, and rebellious. Children found it cool, but parents didn't. There was a true generational divide. Like bands like The Who and the Smothers Brothers and their restless fans, they wanted it. The show would be tough to forget. Joan Baez was also fussing. Everyone was aware that she was a folk singer who advocated for human equality and peace. Born on January 9, 1941, in Staten Island, New York, she had dedicated her life to standing out for what she believed in. Baez was not arrested for demonstrating until 1967. Those who wished for change found solace in her melodies. When she appeared on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, she wanted to perform a song for her husband David Harris, who was facing a 3-year prison sentence. He opposed the Vietnam War and refused to enlist in the military. On the show, Baez expressed her pride in him to the crowd, but CBS chopped off the most of her statement, leaving only a brief remark before she began to sing. One indication that CBS was under a lot of stress was Baez's truncated dedication. The network didn't want to anger donors or the government. Even President Lyndon B. Johnson disliked the presentation because it was so awful. Jones was awake until 3 a.m. to demand that CBS take over the Smothers Brothers over the phone. Nixon then pursued them and put in considerably more effort to remove them from the air. Harry Belafonte was scheduled to perform at the show back in 1968. They put together a powerful display. While Belafonte was singing "Lord Don't Stop the Carnival," footage from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago showed police beating anti-war demonstrators. It was courageous. It was accurate. However, CBS removed the entire episode before it aired. But it didn't stop there. After that, CBS let the GOP to use the 5 minutes they had cut for political advertisements. What started out as a genuine demonstration against political violence became an advertisement for the leaders under attack. It was obvious that the network was on one side. By the end of 1968, the Smothers Brothers were facing significant pressure. According to CBS, all jokes, screenplays, song lyrics, and even entire videotapes had to be submitted for review for a considerable amount of time before they could be aired. The check was not a fast one. Censors would scrutinize every word. Politics, religion, the Vietnam War, or even amusing topics were irrelevant. Every little thing has to live up to their lofty expectations. Additionally, some guest stars with body comedy were frequently filtered or eliminated entirely. The deadline was 10 days before to each show. That was a firm edict at the time, intended to prevent the brothers from crossing the lines too far. The writers felt as though they were caught in a never-ending cycle of waiting, revising, and submitting. CBS frequently requested last-minute modifications even hours before the episode aired. Scriptwriters would quip that it was like getting stabbed 1,000 times. They were also correct. One day, Tom and Dick decided to fight back. Tom played a censor in their sketch, stopping players mid-sentence and tearing up scripts with large scissors. They were being shut down, so it was obvious what the joke was. It was a courageous conclusion. The screen was blank save for silence. However, CBS failed to understand the joke. The sketch was not shown on the network. According to internal notes, CBS believed the skit was too damaging to their reputation. This sketch was also withdrawn, and it included Elaine May. The final thing she said was, "If we can't say anything important, we're just fooling you with empty jokes." It struck with force. Tom was furious. The restrictions had become so rigid that it was illegal to even mock them. Nevertheless, the brothers persisted. Rather than achieving their objectives, they decided to play a game with CBS. As late as possible, they would provide tapes to you. Occasionally, a safe version was supplied to people to review, and then revisions were made just before it was broadcast on television. It made CBS go crazy. According to the network, they were breaching their agreement. CBS eventually had enough in April 1969. The Smothers Brothers were accused of failing to submit a tape on time. The show, which was still among the top 10 most watched in the United States, was cancelled despite CBS's partial responsibility for the delays. The due dates weren't the main point of contention. It was a power issue. Tom Smothers said after the fact that it was all part of a scheme to drown them. The fight was reported to the media. The New York Times published a critical comment claiming that CBS was preventing the Smothers Brothers from being creative. It was backed by more people. Numerous protests and letters were sent to CBS. Politicians and musicians both voiced their opinions. Suddenly, there was more than one program. Free expression on national television was at issue. People at CBS were uneasy with the opinion. They rushed into negotiations to resolve the issues. The Smothers Brothers were adamant about speaking the truth and refused to back down. In the history of television, that stand marked a sea change. CBS had other problems, but Tom stated, "They're not just shutting down our show. They're trying to shut down the truth." Two major sponsors, Ford and Procter & Gamble, started removing their advertisements. Businesses were worried that their customers would be turned off by the show's political and anti-war gags. Quickly, a large sum of money was lost. CBS suffered significant financial losses in a matter of months. According to internal memos, pressure from the sponsors was a major factor in the cancellation. Even a well-liked show might be lost if sponsors fled. Advertisers had conveyed a message, "Speak too freely, and you'll pay the price." Tom was upset afterward and remarked, "We won the lawsuit, but we lost the culture war." One joke was too much. Dick delivered a Nixon version in March 1969, saying succinctly and accurately, "I'll end the Vietnam War as soon as I figure out where the off button is." However, it spooked advertisers and infuriated CBS. The new president and the conflict both struck a chord. This added to the already tense situation within the network. On April 4, 1969, CBS shut down the program. It was immediately cancelled. Everyone knew it was actually about their political beliefs, even if CBS claimed they didn't submit the tapes on time. The show was scheduled to return for a second season. A few weeks prior to the brothers' revival, CBS canceled an episode that had already been filmed. Comedian David Steinberg made another anti-war diatribe in that show. The episode was never broadcast in the United States. Canada was the location of its display. The rejection was unexpected and severe. It warned the other performers that deviating too much from the norm would backfire. In court, things became difficult for the Smothers Brothers. They fought for 4 years, suing CBS for breach of contract. In April 1973, they won. They received $776,300 from the judge, which is more than $5 million in today's currency. History was made by the choice. It demonstrated that networks could not halt performances on the grounds of censorship. But it was a good triumph. Their base was already gone. The enchantment of their comedic hour was never fully reflected in any subsequent work. They then performed a nicer show on NBC, but it was a failure. CBS had a replacement in no time. On June 15, 1969, Hee Haw, a clean country comedy program with country tunes and stupid jokes, made its debut. There was no politics, no humor, no trouble. That was exactly what CBS wanted to happen. It lasted for 23 years. Its success demonstrated that networks would consistently choose safe entertainment over dangerous ones. The fight also altered Tom and Dick. The most damage was done to Tom. He claimed years later that he felt hollow after losing the show. It took a long time to heal and damaged his pride. Dick discovered other activities, such as driving automobiles and making wine, to help him cope. There will never be the same two lads. They endured the wounds. After being dismissed by CBS in 1969, the Smothers Brothers made another attempt in 1970. This time, they performed for ABC. By the summer of 1970, the atmosphere had shifted. ABC used caution. They wished to avoid any issues similar to those that CBS faced. They closely monitored the brothers and advised them to relax. The desire for rebellious fun had diminished. With the end of the Vietnam War, many had moved on. It was a brief show. They lost viewers, therefore ABC didn't grant them a fall slot. This short run demonstrated how rapidly people's preferences can shift. One year they were in the forefront. Before they realized it, they had fallen behind. In January 1975, they made another attempt, this time on NBC. It was a huge first episode. It was the 5th most watched program in the US with a 50 share. That kind of number isn't feasible right now. However, their success was short-lived. Behind the scenes, there was tension. Tom and Dick got into a quarrel with Joe Hamilton, the director. Tom couldn't do retakes without losing some of his earnings. They found it difficult to communicate with the media and meet with authors. The show's ratings quickly declined, and it eventually dropped to the bottom of the list. Hamilton became irate and walked away. At last, Tom was in command of the final 4 NBC shows. Drug-related jokes were among their riskiest, which was unusual for prime time at the time. George Carlin and Ringo Starr were among their notable guests. Despite these positive aspects, NBC terminated the program in the middle of the season. This demonstrated how even the strongest comebacks may be ruined by networks. In 1988, an odd incident occurred. They were asked to return for a 1-hour reunion special after being dismissed by CBS nearly 2 decades ago. Fans even dubbed it the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour's 20th reunion. The show was nominated for 3 Primetime Emmys. Some authors also returned, including Bob Einstein and Steve Martin. I felt at ease and sentimental after watching the show. I felt extremely safe around it, but some people liked it. The old spirit of politics was vanished. Reviewers and people alike enjoyed seeing them again. It was no longer novel, though. CBS revived them for a whole show relaunch that same year. It was an odd era. The Authors Guild went on strike. When the guys had no writers with them, they continued to act in the same way. Most of the amusing things were done by the guests. After the strike ended, they received new SMS once more. the scores somewhat increased. The show even received 5 Emmy nominations. But TV was different. The 2 seasons of the relaunch aired from March 1988 to August 1989. The first one's impact was always greater. The tale of the boys will never be forgotten. In the fall of 2022, UC Santa Barbara's whole library was devoted to the performing arts collection. It contained contracts, photographs, music sheets, recordings, and legal documents. David Suber, the director, stated that it ought to be adjacent to the Library of Congress. This collection demonstrates how they transformed comedy and battled for freedom of speech. Decades after they completed their work, people are still researching it. This demonstrates how comedy can challenge authority and advocate for genuine change. The Smothers Brothers actually left that behind. Even before Saturday Night Live started, they were already breaching the rules. Between 1967 and 1969, they performed. There were many jokes about politics, censorship, and war. Lorne Michaels, who later created Saturday Night Live, was one of the writers they trained. Later, comics like Jon Stewart, Samantha Bee, John Oliver, and Stephen Colbert followed suit. They demonstrated how comedy might provoke thought and expose the truth to influential individuals. Big celebrities in comedy also got their start thanks to the show. One of the original tracks was written by Steve Martin. George Carlin and Rob Reiner also frequently appeared. Many of them later said that this show helped them gain recognition. The brothers created an environment where taking chances was safe. That added a cutting edge to American comedy that persisted for many years. When CBS dismissed them in 1969, they retaliated. Despite having one of the highest ratings, CBS canceled their show due to censoring. The brothers brought them to court. They succeeded. It was a significant case for free expression on TV. For the first time ever, a comedy show had defeated a network. It demonstrated the value of creative freedom. Americans were split on civil rights, Vietnam, and society in general at the time all of this was done. Watching the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was a bridge. They invited acts like Simon and Garfunkel, Jefferson Airplane, and The Who. Even folk musician Pete Seeger, who got into problems for his anti-war song. They also screened recent movies, like the Beatles' Hey Jude. Many people have never seen The Fringe before. It was all said so brilliantly by Bill Maher once. When someone disagreed with them, the brothers didn't hesitate to enrage them. They made no effort to please everyone. Funny people demonstrated their ability to advocate for causes and change the world. Even after the show ended, that lesson remained relevant and holds true today.